Hi there. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about how to use the Navamsa chart. And this isn't going to be a definitive video. I'm just going to demonstrate a couple techniques and perspectives on the Navamsa chart. And I'm just going to be using a transit chart today that I'm pretending is a real person. So a great thing to do with the Navamsa chart is to look at any planet in the Rashi and then see how it changes in the Navamsa. Does it get better? Does it get worse? How does it get better? And how does it get worse? Maybe it ends up in a better or more difficult house placement. Maybe it ends up having better dignity, which is the thing I tend to focus on more than the house placement. Maybe it just gets some really good aspects from some other planets, some really good Rashi aspects. There are so many ways to look at things. So, the question is, where do you start? Well, I think something that a lot of people don't do and that often gets overlooked is to see, like, if we just take the ascendant in each of the charts and compare those, a lot of people don't bear in mind the Rashi of the ascendant in the Navamsa and what bhava it corresponds to in the Rashi. So, in other words, here the ascendant moves into Aries Navamsa with a really well placed Mars. And Aries is the fifth bhava in the Rashi. So automatically below the surface, because the Navamsa is more about subjectivity and it's below the surface, and it's what's really guiding you. If the Rashi is your path, the shape and contour of your path, and the pitfalls and the help that you're going to get on your path, right? The Navamsa is how you approach that path, and the Navamsa is how you alter it and navigate it, and what you choose to do with the events that transpire. Obviously, it also has to do with marriage, and there are many techniques and ways of looking at Navamsa, but this is principally the way I like to look at it the most because it's a nice image of you know the Rashi being the path and the Navamsa being the person walking down the path. So, what does it mean for the Navamsa Lagna to be the fifth house of the Rashi? Well, that just means that fifth house things are going to be a really important part of this person's path. And in fact, here it's interesting because we also have Mars aspecting the fifth house from itself, from the Navamsa ascendant. So there's a little bit of confluence there. And Mars aspects his own house and sign in the Rashi as well. So we're getting some more confluence. So the fifth house deals with children, but it also deals more subjectively with joy and pleasure derived from the pursuit of one's destiny. So it's how we experiment with our creativity and find who we are so that we can pursue our destiny. So this is going to be a really creatively minded individual. This is going to be a person who is going to be really wanting to take risks, really willing to take risks. Because Mars is there, they're going to be a person who just wants to jump into situations, take a lot of initiative, aggressively pursue things that they desire. And this is an interesting contrast to Saturn sitting in the Rashi ascendant because Saturn is going to make a lot of their pursuits feel very difficult, very challenging, very delayed. They're probably going to feel a lot of futility at times, a lot of emptiness. They're going to feel like even when things do work out, it's not really fulfilling and that they don't fit in generally. They're going to feel very much like an outcast on some level. But then underneath all of it, all those limitations, they're going to want to rebel. And it's interesting because Mars is an enemy of Saturn. But Mars is a friend of Jupiter who rules Sagittarius. So ultimately, this Mars shows the person rebelling against Saturnian strictures, right? Uh, Burdens laid upon them by society and family, especially because Saturn rules the second, or difficulties encountered with peer groups and with the person's just just basic challenges in their life and efforts that need to be exerted. And so they're going to, underneath all that, they're going to be mounting this rebellion. And ultimately, it's actually going to help their true nature because Mars is a friend to Jupiter, the ascendant lord. And what's interesting here is we kind of have that repeated because Mars is in its own sign, so it has dignity. And so it Rashi aspects Jupiter, and it can actually help that Jupiter. And that Jupiter is in fairly mediocre condition once again. It's actually in a little bit better condition because here it's in a great enemy's sign. And it's Yuva, which means it can kind of wreak a lot of havoc. Here, it's in a friend sign and it's Vritta, so it's not so capable of manifesting things, but it's in a friend sign. So it has some better dignity and it feels a little bit more like itself. And it gets a nice aspect from its lord, exalted Saturn, a nice Rashi aspect. So whereas Jupiter is pretty mediocre in the Rashi, it's getting aspected by Mars and Rahu, two malefics, doesn't get an aspect from its lord, is in bad dignity, and gets a little tiny bit of help from Mercury. Here, it's getting help from dignified Mars, exalted Saturn, and it's in a better dignity. So overall, it's doing better. So kind of a tangent I got on, but that would just show that this person's faith and openness is going to become more secure, more comfortable with time. And how will that happen? Well, one way to look at that is okay, Jupiter's in Libra here. So this person is naturally going to just be overly influenced by what other people think and sort of how they appear to other people and what's socially acceptable, rather than just following what they believe to be true. Whereas here, they're going to they're going to get help from Saturn, which very much governs independence, and Mars, which very much governs breaking free of things. And it's in Aquarius, which is another air Rashi. So maybe they're going to start getting some better advice from people. They're going to meet people um, who would give them better advice and really support their lofty ideals and things, even though here they're too afraid to sort of transgress what's kind of socially established and socially acceptable. And in both charts, Jupiter is in the 11th house from the Lagna, which is kind of a difficult house for any planet to be in, considered as a Karaka. Um, it's not the end of the world or anything like that, but the 11th house makes very lofty ideals and sort of being validated by everyone else a theme. And so it sort of holds back the natural indications of that planet. And that's sort of happening on a double level because Venus is actually starving Jupiter. And Venus can definitely starve Jupiter because she's in a great friend sign. So she's fairly um, poised to starve or help planets. Okay, cool. So another way to so we don't want to forget about that fifth house, right? Children could become an important thing for this person at a certain point, and we would want to examine some other subcharts to see if that's really the case. But anything fifth house can become an important thing for this person below the surface. Next, I like to look at the Bhava cusps as they fall in the Navamsa. So here we have the 10th Bhava cusp, the midheaven, which is actually one of the more reliably calculated cusps, and that's falling in the Navamsa Lagna. So 10th house matters are going to be a really important thing for this person, achieving great things, right? Great fruits, you know, conquering the public sphere, things like that. And whereas Saturn sits in the Lagna in the Rashi, and Saturn is a Karaka of the 10th house, but Saturn does not rule the 10th house. And so, as a Karaka of the 10th house, this person is likely to just feel like really burdened by the things that they sort of just have to do, you know? Whereas here, they're actually going to be taking action in creating, or not creating, but really taking a more fulfilling individual approach to how they fulfill their ultimate duties and how they build an empire and achieve things in the public eye and stuff like that. So you can do this with, again, all the planets, all the houses. You can even check yogas in the Navamsa. Like if a person didn't have a Raj Yoga in the Rashi, but they had a Raj Yoga in the Navamsa, that will say something. The Rashi is sort of just what you get. It's like your raw karma is not really considered in any details or subtlety. It's just what you get. But the Navamsa is what's impacting your inner life and what's impacting your personal development as you walk down the path of life. So if you had like a Raj Yoga in the Navamsa that wasn't in the Rashi, that would mean that you are attuning your consciousness to what that Raj Yoga indicates, and the capacity for greatness does exist, but it doesn't fall into your lap like if it was in the Rashi, and therefore it may not manifest externally. But that doesn't really matter because the external world is less real and the inner world is much more real. And the nice thing about Navamsa is that it gives us insight into the person's inner life and how they're going to be developing over time, what they're going to do with whatever occurs in the Rashi, how they're going to use it, how they're going to take it, how they're going to approach it. And so the Navamsa literally gives us a way to look more clearly at the inside of the person and see that inner journey, even if some of those things don't manifest as concretely, at least when we're talking about yogas, as they would if they were in the Rashi.